Kaiki. In Japan, families keep the Buddhist tradition of celebrating the anniversary of a loved one's death. But now, every year on September 26th, a manga artist and hundreds of his fans meet up at this local bar in Yokosuka to celebrate the death anniversary of anime's greatest gambler. That manga artist is none other than Nobuyuki Fukumoto, the creator of the famous Kaiji and the much beloved anime Akagi. While we've already covered Akagi in our previous video essay, and Kaiji will be the next one, this video is all about Fukumoto's original gambling manga, the manga that popularized the gambling genre, the manga that made Fukumoto's career, allowing him to write Kaiji in the first place, and the manga whose final arc has taught millions about the meaning of life, including one account that we'll hear about at the end of this video. Running from 1989 to 2002 with a live-action adaptation in 2018, the story follows Ten and Hiroyuki, who are both professional gamblers hired for their skills by the Yakuza to play in illegal high-stakes games. Millions of dollars are up for grabs, blood gets shed, and legends are made. By no exaggeration, this might be my favorite gambling manga of all time, even more than Akagi or Kaiji. The overarching storylines and character motivations backed by their own fears and philosophies, the bombastic, play-by-play explosive back and forth of the matches, and the heart-wrenching ending that has left such a long-lasting impression on so many. Let's explore what might just be the greatest gambling manga of all time, the one that started them all, Ten, the nice guy on the path to Tenhou. Back in 1989, when Ten was first released, the Japanese economy was booming in the 80s after the recession of the 1970s. Stories centered around gambling were rising in popularity as the price of stocks and real estate skyrocketed. Many people had the money to go out to gamble, so stories about characters making insane comebacks or finding creative solutions to different problems were getting more popular. Ten was the first manga to find any level of success and ended up being extremely popular for its time. Ten, like all gambling stories, started out its life with one major issue. Who the hell cares about gambling and storytelling? All stories get a little boring when the protagonist has to win every battle and the obstacles in their way seem trivial, but with stories centered around gambling, things get so contrived when a character has a 1 in a billion chance to hit this one last trick and then they do it 5 times in a row. That's not interesting. That's not good storytelling. When you gamble in real life, you don't know what the outcome will be, and winning long shot odds is such a huge thrill because the outcome is so unlikely. Winning in the face of enormous odds or overcoming a seemingly unbeatable foe is the heart of many good anime. Goku vs. Frieza, Netero vs. Meruem, the part in Jujutsu Kaisen where Geto plays Mahjong, you get the idea. The most important part of these stories is that the main character overcomes those obstacles and learns something about themselves or digs deep to improve themselves to defeat the evil in front of them. In gambling anime, you don't have that luxury. I can't get a power level over 9,000 and suddenly get 4 of a kind every time I play poker. No matter what, the odds don't change. A character winning anything from a poker hand to rock, paper, scissors is all predetermined and only there to service the plot. So what makes Ten so damn good? There are 3 aspects to Ten that make the gambling incredible to follow, but I'll only give you 2 for now. First of all, characters getting incredible hands or getting the right draw at the right moment doesn't come from them having some sort of anime protagonist powers. They don't win because they're the main character. The moments where characters get exactly what they need doesn't come from luck, it comes from downright cheating. Every character in Ten cheats at some point in the story, and each character has their own method of cheating that the others need to figure out to play around in their own creative ways. Battles swing back and forth between a villain using something similar to marking cards, taking a huge lead, and Ten figuring out how the marking works and how to use the villain's cheating system against them to find the win. Some of these characters are masters of sleight of hand, while others take the time to set up marks to make it so they know exactly what's in an opponent's hand. Ten, despite being a nice guy who normally plays to defend everyday people being taken advantage of by the Yakuza, like when he plays representing a store owner who will lose his business and home if he loses, still goes out of his way to cheat when the going gets tough, and it's up to his opponents to call him out on how he cheated. There's a sentiment in Fukumoto's works that if you can't figure out that you're being cheated or how it's happening, you're the one at fault and deserve to lose. It's all a part of this degenerate underground gambling. Secondly, Ten reads a lot like a sports manga. I don't know anything about boxing, volleyball, or basketball, but Hajime no Ippo, Haikyuu, and Kuroko no Basket are still fantastic anime that, if you're watching this video, you'll at least have heard of. Sports anime, even for sports you don't follow, are incredible to watch, not just because sports represent a medium for the universal struggle against limits that tests a character's physical, mental, and spiritual limits, but also the intimate character psychology that dives deep into what drives people: insecurity, redemption, pride, passion. The pressure of competition strips people down into their core motivations. We see their internal monologues during crucial moments, understanding not just what they're doing, but why the play matters to them personally. Additionally, Ten is a unique gambling story in that it doesn't just center around the main character, but a team of individuals that Ten ends up drafting to fight in a team battle against another group of Yakuza representative players. Just like sports anime, Ten as a gambling manga depicts desperate individuals as they forge bonds through shared struggle. The chemistry between teammates, the tension between rivals, and the relationships between mentor and student, these become the emotional backbone for a story that would otherwise be about cold numbers and calculating risk. The best sports manga understand that people don't just watch for the mechanics of the game, but for the emotion, drama, and stories of people fighting for what they believe in, and the teammates that depend on them. That's why, even though Ten centers around competitors playing Riichi Mahjong, a game that isn't particularly hard to start playing, but is incredibly deep in its strategies, and the more time you put into it, the more you come to appreciate how complex it can be at a high level. You don't need to know anything about Mahjong to enjoy the rich characters, emotional stakes, and dramatic finishes found in Ten. We'll get to that all-important third aspect that makes Ten shine later in the video, but for now, let's take a look at the opening chapters of Ten and how it got to be the poster child of gambling manga, paving the way for shows like Kaiji, Kakegurui, and Usogui, because it wasn't always the sort of gambling manga you might expect. Although everybody knows Nobuyuki Fukumoto for Kaiji and Akagi, his career didn't start out with gambling manga. In fact, he didn't even start out his career as Nobuyuki Fukumoto. Writing under the pseudonym Nobuyuki Tobi, he wrote and illustrated a string of different romantic comedy series. None of them really found purchase until he started a new comedy series published in Kindai Mahjong Gold. You guessed it, Ten, the nice guy on the path of Tenhou. In the beginning, we follow Ten, who makes his living from playing Mahjong to support his multiple wives? Yeah, I don't know, he's in a polygamous relationship for some reason, but hey, there are women in a Fukumoto work, so that's something. Kaiji and Akagi literally don't have any female characters at all, so it's a start. There's a young man playing at a local mahjong parlor who is eating everyone else alive and taking them all to the cleaners. He plays like a computer and he can't be beaten. Ten gets called in. He's the best. He's the guy you call when you need a sure win. He's a mahjong god, except he sucks at mahjong, actually. He's really not that good and isn't aware of the basic rules that most players would know about. Hiroyuki, the young man who has been kicking ass and taking names, is on the verge of winning by a landslide. In any normal situation, there would be no chance whatsoever of a comeback. But this is Ten. We don't have to rely on chance when we can rely on cheating. And when I say cheating, I mean like the most blatant cheating in the history of cheating. In Mahjong, you need a win condition, basically something that's special about your hand in order to win points. You get points based on how hard these win conditions are to collect, meaning that the less statistically possible your hand, generally the more valuable it is. These win conditions can stack with each other, meaning that you could combine valuable conditions, just like how poker has straights and flushes, but there's also the straight flush. The most valuable win conditions are called Yakuman, worth 32,000 points at baseline and 48,000 points if you're the dealer, who gets a 1.5 times multiplier for that round. For a baseline of relativity here, each player starts out with only 25,000 points, so a Yakuman can end a game in seconds, and yes, Yakuman can also stack, making for nearly impossible moments where you can nuke your opponents into oblivion if you're lucky enough, or if you're good enough to get away with cheating. This is exactly what Ten does in his matches. As soon as the going gets tough and he's backed into a corner, he goes for a double Yakuman, which as dealer is worth 96,000 points. But how do you win a hand in Mahjong anyway? A winning mahjong hand, because mahjong is a game designed in a very human way, is just like your actual hand. You have 5 fingers, 4 of which have 3 sections, and 1 of which has 2 sections. You need to complete each finger individually by collecting tiles within the same suit that are either in sequential order, like 2, 3, 4, or match each other's value in a triplet, like 8, 8, 8. Your thumb, in this scenario though, always needs to be a pair, like 5, 5. So long as the tiles within each finger are in the same suit, you're good to go. Your hand can win. Value increases from a basic winning hand when you do something special across multiple or all of your fingers, because as we said, your fingers can just kind of be there in their own world, or you can make combinations of tiles that make your fingers work together. You have 5 fingers, but they're all a part of the same hand. You might have all of your fingers in the same suit, just like a flush in poker. You might have 3 different suits across 3 fingers, but they all have the same numbers of a sequence. All of your fingers might be triplets, or maybe your hand is just green. Yeah, green tiles only. That's a Yakuman, actually. But 10 goes for the Yakuman that's in the title of the manga itself, Tenhou, which is the first part of my name here on YouTube, and is known as the Blessing of Heaven for how incredibly rare and lucky it is. This win condition can be done with any winning hand. The only win condition is that you win the hand by drawing the very first tile of the match. 10 stacks this with Churen Poto, known in English as 9 gates, where you get a straight flush, right? But you also have a triplet of the 1s and the 9s in the suit, which suits only run from 1 to 9. So this hand is so rare that the running joke in the Mahjong community is that if you win with 9 gates at the Mahjong meetup, you gotta be prepared to be struck by lightning on the way home because you've used up all your luck. Winning Tenhou with 9 gates is something that literally never happens. In a Monte Carlo simulation of 100 billion randomly drawn hands, Tenhou happens 267,813 times. Tenhou that also has 9 gates as a double Yakuman happens once. 1 in 100 billion times. And 10 is known for winning with this double Yakuman everywhere he goes. Just like in the first fight against Hiroyuki, the pressure is on, 10 is in the dealer's seat, and he needs a miracle to make a comeback. Maybe something like a 1 in 100 billion chance? Just as everybody draws their hands and 10 takes his first tile, the lights go out and it's pitch black in the room. Some shuffling can be heard, but nothing can be seen, and the lights come back on, and it's just some goofball who accidentally switched off the lights. Oops. But we cut back to 10, smiling, who declares sumo to win his hand, Tenhou Churen Poto. This ridiculous and brazen cheating is played for laughs. Hiroyuki can't figure out exactly how he cheated, but he knows there's no way in hell he actually won that hand legitimately. He gets his money taken from him, and 10 goes on his merry way, using his earnings to be the nice guy that he is, supporting his friends and family and wives with his winnings, and even setting up a Christmas tree for a young girl who thought Christmas might not come this year. The tree is weak and broken at the bottom, so he has to sit behind the tree and hold the damn thing up the entire night so that she has a good holiday. This is the kind of guy that 10 is, and it's totally backwards from his scarred and scary leather jacket demeanor. Why? Well, in the transition from comedy manga to gambling drama, it's revealed that 10's scars are actually from getting beaten and cut up by the Yakuza for cheating so brazenly. 10 doesn't care about the pain and suffering he endures, so long as the people he helps get the support and justice they deserve. The people around him don't understand his way of thinking, like when Hiroyuki, drawn to 10 and his abilities, starts living with him, and 10 gives away all of Hiroyuki's winnings and possessions to the less fortunate. He's generous to a fault. Hiroyuki is rightfully furious and decides to move out and start playing for real money in Yakuza rep matches. And this is where the manga starts to get serious, with gambling matches between Hiroyuki, 10, and other villain of the week types. One of these villains is the infamous Akagi Shigeru, who would go on to get his own manga, anime adaptation, video games, and several live-action films and series. And we'll talk quite a bit about Akagi later on in the video, but for now, we need to take a little detour to the world of the living. Because I don't have the time in this video to talk about the mechanisms of Riichi Mahjong and the micro-level strategy happening in each panel, I'm going to explain the appeal of Mahjong in the best way that I know how to better prepare you for the battles to come. You'll have to trust me here, but the best way that I can think of to explain the beauty of Mahjong is to explain the place that many Mahjong players come from, the fighting game community.
You ain't from Michigan if you ain't done this before.
You ain't from Michigan if you ain't done this before. I love that meme. The fighting game community consists of gamers and enthusiasts who love games where you fight one another, like Street Fighter, Tekken, Soul Calibur, or my personal favorites, Third Strike and BlazBlue. Riichi Mahjong has often been lovingly referred to as the fighting game retirement home. There are so many similarities between what makes Mahjong a great game and what makes fighting games so compelling. First of all, you have this grassroots scene with a genuine love for the game. Yes, you have different methods of playing online, but what really matters to these communities is the sense of camaraderie that comes from in-person meetups at your locals, which support your damn locals. Tournaments are held with prize money and trophies like Evo or Frosty Fastings, which this year will actually feature an official Riichi Mahjong tournament. In a fighting game, you have your more basic fighter, like something along the lines of Street Fighter. This is the granddaddy of all fighting games and is more akin to what you'd think of as a classic experience of fighting games, a lot of footsies. You then have different layers of complexity, with air dashers like Guilty Gear, Uniool, and BlazBlue, team games like 2XKO, Marvel, and Dragon Ball, and 3D fighters like Tekken, DOA, Virtua Fighter, and Soul Calibur. In the same vein, there are many varieties of Mahjong, mostly stemming from cultural and geographical regions with different rule sets for a similar game. Chinese Mahjong, invented over 300 years ago and changing quite significantly over the centuries, is the Street Fighter equivalent for Mahjong, with plenty of other versions sprouting up like Hong Kong, Singapore, American, Sichuan, and of course Japanese Mahjong, aka Riichi Mahjong, which is the variant found in manga and anime. Riichi Mahjong, because of its rule set and competitive viability, spread like wildfire across the world, being played by millions worldwide. What's funny about Riichi Mahjong is that it falls into the same trap that fighting games do. The high barrier to entry with a lot of exclusive lingo and inside jokes. If I were to say the sentence, "Damn, that Yomi on that Oki was crazy because he went for DP off my FFCS wake-up check, which normally gives me a 50-50 on block for the air drill overhead high-low, but as a punish I went for a combo ending in steer so I get the orb set up in the corner to be at advantage." None of these words are in the Bible. Or maybe the joke, how to approach a woman who is holding down back when she has a fireball and a flash kick. At this point, some of you are going, "We get it, you like Batista." And I do. I love charge characters, and she's the coolest charge character of all time, fight me. At the same time, from a Mahjong perspective, I could talk about how Oya has Chinitsu waiting on a Suji trap he got from a Ryokan, which you can't deal into because his Kawa is full of Onpai from other suits that you can beta ori, which is a sentence that will make sense to Mahjong heads in the same way that the fighting game lingo will make sense to fighting game nerds. That said, this is sort of a double-edged sword for these communities. Yes, you have lingo that the community can bond over, you basically speak the same language within the in-group, but you're also presenting a semi-gatekeepy learning curve to those that want to get into the community. I personally see this as a rite of passage and more like a dictionary of very particular terms that describe things in one word rather than explaining it in an English sentence. It's kind of a good thing. Like, yeah, I could say that Okizemi is the range of offensive options that I can inflict on my opponent as they're getting off the ground in a fight, or I could say that the ready to win state when 4 of your 5 blocks is complete, rather than Tenpai or Okizemi, but I'm just gonna say Oki or Tenpai, man. But it's not just the communities that have similarities, it's the games as well. There's a clear sense of reading your opponent in both games, conditioning your opponent into choosing different options, and the mental stack of remembering the different options you and your opponents have depending on the game state. Additionally, you have different characters in fighting games with their own playstyle, right? Like, everyone has their own version of punches, kicks, grabs, and special moves, but everyone has some special combination of those attacks that make them the character that they are. You have rushdown characters like Rashid, neutral monsters like Chun-Li, grapplers that go for a lot of big damage all at once like Zangief, and zoners that play super defensively like Guile. These are playstyles that are also found in Riichi Mahjong, with different players preferring different playstyles based on what win conditions they like to go for, how much they're willing to push or fold a hand, and how they're going to use their gameplay to manipulate others. I know a few Mahjong players that genuinely feel like grapplers, taking out chunks of my health with one move while playing with their heart more than a calculating approach. I've met rushdown players that play a club style who have a calculated, sometimes overt, aggression to win a bunch of overwhelming small hits to win a match in the long run. I've also been the defensive or neutral player, biding my time and folding when I need to, but capitalizing on and punishing the mistakes and habits of my opponents just like the charge characters I play in fighting games, like Batista, Mei, Guile, Kagura, and Parasoul. I think there's a lot of overlap between Mahjong and fighting game players, where most of the Mahjong people that I know are also into fighting games, or were at some point, because the similarities in playstyles and player agency. You really feel like your character is an extension of yourself in fighting games, and in Mahjong you're really faced with who you are when you're making different decisions on when to push or fold or what hand to go for in a given moment. Your gameplay is putting up a mirror to yourself, and it's really interesting that that gameplay can be so introspective. The main difference between Mahjong and fighting games is that I don't have to have teenage level reaction times to play Mahjong at a high level. Additionally, Mahjong is a game kind of similar to chess, where I can learn how to play it and play it for the rest of my life, rather than having to learn new characters or patches or mechanics or games. Like, I remember my best friend in high school getting me into fighting games with BlazBlue back in like 2013, maybe, and my favorite character by far was Lai Chi Fei Ling. I remember watching Galileo and Lord Knight play all the time, man. I went back to play her again recently because I've enjoyed charge characters so much for the past few years that I wanted to see if I still liked her, and man, do her high execution combos not click with my charge character ass brain. Like, Batista is a hard character to pilot, but my brain no longer works in motion controls. But I actually discovered something when I went back to play Lai Chi. Check this out.
Alright, I wanted to look at her command list. The Great Wheel, right? One of Circle's Crimson Peacock, one of Bamboo, straight through, you know? Renchan? Okay, the 3 dragons. Unarmed lunge, I don't think that's anyway. Reach? What? Okay. Chon-Con? Robbing the Con? 4 wins? All green, all terminals. 13 orphans is one of her fucking supers. 9 games? Dude, really? Really? This whole time I've been Mahjong filled and I never knew it. I was doomed from the beginning. Oh my god.
Yeah! Turns out I was meant to be a Mahjong player all along. Crazy how things just come together. Small world. So all of that is to say that Mahjong is a game where everyone is using the same tiles, but there's plenty of different playstyles and win conditions in a game so deep, it could use its own dictionary. And just like some of the team battles that take place in the FGC team tournaments like the Co-op Cup, the main arc of 10 is a team battle between East and West, like Daigo versus Alex Valle back in the day, like New York versus Cali FGC battles that littered the SF4 days. Let's take a look at the main arc of 10, the one that sets up the best character death and funeral arc I've ever seen, the East-West Showdown. In the world of underground Mahjong, different Yakuza clans and individual high-ranking Yakuza members settle bets and gamble away assets not on their own, but with the best Mahjong players they can find to represent them. These players are known as representative or rep players. It's kind of like Trial by Combat from Game of Thrones. Ten and Hiroyuki are both representative players making a living from shares of their earnings from the battles with other rep players. Since World War II, the rules of these matches between rep players have been using the more standard Riichi Mahjong rules as imparted by the powerful Yakuza clans in Eastern Japan. Every couple years, the rep players from Eastern Japan face off against Western Japan, with the rule set for the rep matches all across Japan being decided by the victor. This time around though, West has a secret weapon, a man who rose to the ranks of the Yakuza to become the leader of his own group, Harada Katsumi. An absolute beast at Mahjong stemming from his ability to read people and manipulate them to his own advantage. Harada might just be enough to take down East this time around. Right behind Harada in strength is Soga, an older gentleman known for being one of the best Mahjong players in the world, or at least he was before Akagi. Akagi is known as a once-in-a-lifetime genius and is regarded as a god among men when it comes to gambling. In his prime, he never lost a match, starting from the time that he was 13. Those events are the subject of his own spin-off, named after him, Fukumoto's second most famous work, Akagi. Soga, having been overshadowed by the greatest Mahjong player in history, has a bone to pick with Akagi and is gunning to take him down when Akagi signs on to play for the side of East. Not to be outdone, in fact, Soga also has his own spin-off series that's currently being serialized in Kendai Mahjong. The remaining players representing East are Ten and Hiroyuki, along with a character named Ken, who is a local mahjong player known for playing with his heart, Kanamitsu, a Shinto priest known to be one of the best players in northern Japan, and Ginji, an older gentleman who was a professional mahjong hustler who made his living scamming poor souls out of their hard-earned cash. Both East and West teams have equal players, starting with 8 players per team and playing down in an elimination bracket until the final 4 competitors are decided. But I'm only bringing up the characters that will matter at the end of the video. The East-West battle is the majority of Ten's 18-volume story, running from Volume 4 all the way to the end of Volume 15. If you like mahjong, this part of the story is going to be your new addiction. The back and forth is so skillful and wonderfully thought out, but for the purposes of this video, explaining these complexities to an audience who might not be experienced in mahjong, well, that's just a little bit too much to ask for that audience to sit through. And what makes this arc special is the dynamics between each of the characters. Everyone gets their own opportunity to shine, and everyone gets an opportunity to showcase their philosophy at the mahjong table. Harada, for instance, just can't stop winning. He's too good for the majority of the competition, and his success starts to envelop him in a deadly aura. Ken, playing across from him, realizes that he needs to take him down while he can, but he'll have to risk cheating to overtake Harada's points. He'll have to go for a risky maneuver. He'll swap out the tile he draws with a tile that lets him win. All he has to do is palm the tile he doesn't want. He keeps it hidden. He does it. He pulls it off. He declares victory, and Harada catches him cheating and pulls out a blade. Ken is shocked and reflexively puts his hand over his heart when Harada lunges to stab him from across the table. The tile hidden in Ken's hand is the only thing that stops the blade from plunging into his heart. Suddenly, the game's stakes are raised. Yes, you can cheat, but you damn well better get away with it if you don't want to face the repercussions. Harada is firmly established as the best combination for an antagonist, both dangerous and competent. The only hope for the side of East at this point is to eliminate every other player from West so that they can play the final game of Mahjong as a 3v1 versus Harada. After Ginji is eliminated and after things shake out awkwardly, we're left with 5 players: Harada, Akagi, Ten, Hiroyuki, and Soga. But Mahjong is a 4-player game. How will this work? Well, Akagi, Ten, and Hiroyuki will switch out for each other after a certain number of discards, playing the same hands as the person before them if it happens to be in the middle of a round. So we have Harada, who is the powerhouse of the Yakuza, Soga, who was a legend in his youth and who wants nothing more than to dethrone Akagi, Ten, who is a strong Mahjong player at this point and is team captain of East, Akagi, who is a god among men, and Hiroyuki, who is the least skilled amongst all of them by a wide margin. And it's here that we delve into Hiroyuki's character and his relationships with Ten and Akagi. This is where we get into the sports anime aspect of the team drama. He's a great Mahjong player, far better than the average person, but he's no match for the titans sitting across from him at the table. Since he's not well versed in cheating, his honest demeanor of trying to overcome everything on his own through his own strength falters, and all he can do is hope to avoid losing rather than try to win. He deals into hand after hand, and Akagi tries his best to swap in for him when he's on the brink of destruction. Hiroyuki is overthinking everything. Akagi gives him a piece of advice: don't think. You don't need to think about what's going to kill you, because if it was going to, it's going to either way. Thinking about things too much is going to take you further and further from the real game, the instinct that Akagi feels when gambling. And this advice works for a time until we reach the final hand, when the honest Hiroyuki falls into Harada's trap and gets caught cheating. Unbeknownst to the East players, during a short break, Harada had his cronies swap out a few of the tiles in the set with extra white dragons. When playing Mahjong, there are always 4 copies of each tile in a given set, with tiles running 1 through 9 in the numbered suits of characters, circles, and bamboo, with additional tiles called honor tiles that give you certain win conditions if you have a triplet of them in your hand. These are the 4 cardinal directions: east, south, west, and north, and the 3 dragons of different colors: the red dragon, green dragon, and white dragon. On most white dragon tiles, there's simply nothing on the face of the tile. It's blank. That doesn't make it a wild card or give it any special qualities, it's just something that has value if you collect 3 of them. Harada instructs his henchmen to remove 1 copy of the 5 of bamboo and 1 copy of the 5 of circles from the game and replace them with these white dragons, meaning that with the 4 white dragons normally found in Mahjong, there are in fact 6 white dragons to be drawn by the players. As the round progresses, Hiroyuki calls Ricci with a really good hand that we don't have to talk about, but as we talked about earlier, you have 5 fingers to make up one mahjong hand, and in this case, Hiroyuki has completed 4 of his 5 fingers without calling tiles from opponents to do so, therefore he can declare that he's about to win by locking in his hand and gaining access to bonus value that you can't get unless you lock in and call Ricci. The white dragon comes into his hand twice, allowing him to use it as a pair, and there's no use trying to make it into a triplet because the other 2 white dragons are in the discard piles of other players already. There's no other white dragons to draw. Except he draws a 5th white dragon? Hiroyuki is visibly confused, but ultimately decides to discard it anyway. As it stands, he's 1 tile away from winning a pretty valuable hand and doesn't want to throw that away just because of some weird anomaly. The turns pass by, and Harada seems to know that something's amiss, like he plans on capitalizing on this opportunity somehow, and when Hiroyuki draws a 6th white dragon and discards it, to everyone else at the table who can't see the pair in Hiroyuki's hand, it looks like the 4th white dragon is being discarded and it's just another tile. There's really only one hand that could win off of that, and it would be insane to think that anyone would be willing to try and wait on the very last copy of a tile for such a rare and valuable Yakuman. Harada wins with 13 orphans. Hiroyuki is knocked out of the tournament, and now it'll be Ten and Akagi versus Harada and Soga. But wait, Hiroyuki protests this, saying that there's more than 4 white dragons, and flips over his hand to reveal the pair in his hand. Ten and Akagi look at each other, knowing what Hiroyuki just admitted to, but Harada points it out to him. So you're saying you knew, and didn't say anything hoping you'd just win before anyone noticed? It sounds like cheating to me. Hiroyuki is screwed either way. There's no way he can get out of this. He ruined the chance for a 3v1. This is just like him. He's such a screw up. At least it'll be Ten and Akagi. Akagi? Akagi flips his hand forward and declares a win on the white dragon that Hiroyuki dropped. This would allow him to win the hand with priority over Harada with a rule called head bump, determined by seat order when you sit down at the table. But Akagi's hand isn't waiting on a white dragon, so what gives? Akagi calls out Harada for switching out the tiles and makes a bet with Harada. He says that the white dragons were put into the game by taking out certain tiles from the wall, and that tile box in the corner has them in it. He says that this white dragon that Hiroyuki dealt in with is in fact his winning tile if you look at the tiles in the box. Akagi is waiting on either the 2 of bamboo, 5 of bamboo, or 5 of circles through the use of a complex 7-tile shape that is interesting if you're into mahjong. But more importantly, he declares that Hiroyuki's discarded white dragon was actually the 5 of bamboo. If he's right, Hiroyuki is saved, but if he's wrong, Akagi will have to take a penalty for guessing the wrong tile and incorrectly winning on the wrong tile. The points penalty associated with that would put Akagi in the negative, knocking him out of the tournament. Akagi, the badass that he is, accepts. They take out the tiles in question and they flip over a 5 of circles. It's a part of Akagi's winning weight, but it's not the tile that he specifically called out. The other tile gets flipped over, and it's not the 5 of bamboo. It's the 5 of characters. The henchman misheard the instructions and swapped out the wrong tile. Akagi, despite reading Harada correctly, could have never predicted the boneheaded error from the henchman. Hiroyuki celebrates that the 5 of circles was a part of Akagi's weight, but Akagi remains silent. He looks downtrodden, like a light that used to be lit inside him has gone out. He missed the prediction, something that he never would have missed in his prime. Standing on honor, Akagi declares that he's out of the tournament. He predicted the wrong tile. Harada even says that he'll honor the win, but it's not good enough for Akagi. He knows when to be done. He stands to leave and tells Ten it's all up to him. Akagi leaves the room and Hiroyuki chases after him. He says that it has to be Akagi. He's the only one who can stand by Ten and win the battle. He's a god among men, the best mahjong player in history. But this is where the manga becomes a contender for my all-time favorite. Akagi tells Hiroyuki that he doesn't need that kind of win. Hiroyuki tries to protest, but Akagi frowns. Breaking the silence, he monologues. Before we were human, I wonder what we were. Life is all connected. For a long time, that's how I thought of things. When I pass on, as a human being, I'll return to the earth, and after thousands of years pass, something will be born again. So I don't care about when I die, because life is eternally reborn. The only problem is, when I drop dead as a human being, the consciousness I know as myself will be gone. That is the problem. In other words, to put it bluntly, I'm not afraid of dying. I could die at any time. What I'm afraid of is losing who I am. That's the only thing I can't take. It's the only thing that I'll stand firm on. Do you understand? Whether I win or lose, I want to win or lose as Akagi Shigeru. Hiroyuki takes in Akagi's words and knows that he has to accept them. Hiroyuki goes on to play the rest of the East-West battle, and there's quite a bit more mahjong that happens in this story that you should definitely go read for yourself, but it's the final arc that I'd like to focus on here. The final arc of 10 is what inspired me to make this video in the first place. It really, truly spoke to me, and this monologue by Akagi foreshadows what's to come. What's fascinating about Akagi's characterization here is something that Fukumoto has built not just over the course of 10, but over the course of Akagi's own series. This is where Fukumoto weaves in the philosophies that inspire not just himself, but the characters he writes. There are layers and layers to peel back here, but it all starts with how Akagi is perceived. He's the best mahjong player, without any doubt. He's in the mahjong zeitgeist, even in real life. That when something incredible happens in mahjong, people call you Akagi for pulling it off. He's known as the mahjong demon, this man playing at an unreachable level that everyone else aspires to. In Western philosophy, we would assign this man of overwhelming self-determination, strength, and competence as the Übermensch, a term coined by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. You might recognize things that Nietzsche is famously misinterpreted for, like the phrase God is dead, which many people take as a declaration of atheism when he really just meant that God doesn't galvanize social classes like it did in the past. And even the term Übermensch has been heavily misinterpreted by a certain German dictator. But all that aside, Nietzsche believed in what he called the will to power, which refers to the fundamental drive in all living things to assert, enhance, and express their strength and influence over themselves and their environment, which he saw as the basic motivating force of life rather than mere survival or pleasure. What's really interesting is that Akagi in his monologue is talking about he doesn't mind death, how as a living being he'll be eternally reborn, so what the others think about him leaving the match doesn't matter. He settles things on his own terms and thinks about himself in the greater natural cycle of death and rebirth. And that doesn't sound like Nietzsche. That sounds like Buddhism. Buddhism puts forward the ideas of samsara, nirvana, and anatta. Samsara is the cycle of life, death, and rebirth that everyone goes through, and you're reborn based on your karma. Nirvana is the goal for Buddhists, to escape the cycle of samsara and achieve enlightenment through the elimination of craving, aversion, or ignorance, similar to what Akagi told Hiroyuki earlier during the match. Anatta refers to no self, where there's no permanent consciousness that moves on to the next life. Like one flame passing from one candle to another, the second flame is neither the first flame nor something entirely different or without what came before it. This concept is something that Akagi would be clashing against when talking about wanting to win, lose, and even die as himself. He certainly would be himself up until the end, but his consciousness wouldn't live on in a Buddhist philosophy. He's fine with returning to the eternal stream in a physical sense, but as the genius he isn't ready to give up being himself. There would have to be some sort of outside factor forcing his hand for him to confront this in himself. If it isn't Buddhism, if it isn't Nietzsche, then it's a shame that there isn't a philosopher who was not only the first to be inspired by Eastern philosophy and directly by Buddhism, and was the person who directly influenced Nietzsche, kind of making him the perfect in-between for Akagi's own philosophies, and his name is Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer essentially tried to fit Buddhist principles into a Western metaphysical framework. While Nietzsche had the will to power, Schopenhauer came first with the will to life. a philosophy heavily inspired by Buddhism in that Schopenhauer also believed in a universal energy and driving force that we all return to in the end. While Buddhism believes that our spirit energy needs to escape that cycle, and Nietzsche believed that you need to dominate and maintain control over that universal energy, Schopenhauer fell in the middle of the two, believing that the will of life, the driving force that makes us want to live and reproduce and eventually return to the earth, is something to understand and subsequently suppress. For Schopenhauer, the innate struggle to live and carry on your genetics is exactly what leads to suffering in life. This aligns with Akagi's philosophy of trusting his instincts and his gut while gambling, rather than taking the perceived safer routes that your survival instinct might trust. He finds victories where people blinded by the will would lose every time. To that end, Akagi lets go of his individual desires under the universal will. It's worth mentioning here that Schopenhauer did not believe that you should throw away your survival instincts or that choosing death on a whim was somehow righteous. In fact, he wrote, "Choosing death doesn't defy the will, it affirms it. The person still wants life, just not this particular life with its suffering. They're saying, I want a better existence, not I want to cease willing altogether." What Schopenhauer advocated was more akin to reaching a state of indifference to life or death, where you don't seek out death nor cling to life either. Desire leads to suffering, so one must learn to live without desire. Those desires almost all come from the illusion of individualism and allowing the will to overtake your life. The truth, Schopenhauer said, could most closely be found through either, ideally, asceticism, like becoming a monk and giving up all your desires, or through aesthetic experience, namely music, which was in itself like an expression of the will. This reminds me of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and how he thought the universe was created through music and everything is created in symphony. All living things have some connection to music, and Schopenhauer thought that this would show people that the will existed. This would go on to inspire artists and composers all around the Western world, but none so influential nor influenced as Wagner. Yep, this is his music. Wagner was so inspired by Schopenhauer that he accredited the inspiration of his last two operas to Schopenhauer's philosophy. Without Schopenhauer, Wagner wouldn't have been the same person that he was, and his art would have been changed because of that. As an opera singer myself, I have to say that I'm glad that Wagner had the inspiration that he did, because his operas are incredible. They normally feature protagonists who are Helden tenors or heroic tenors as a voice type. These are typically men who are assumed to be a bass or baritone singers for most of their life until they unlock their upper range with more rigorous training, allowing them to carry the power and bombastic nature of a bass to the ringing ranges of a higher, normally more dainty tenor voice. Just like Schopenhauer, just like Akagi even, these voices push past the illusion to become what they always were meant to be. They become a true spectacle on the stage. Now, Akagi himself isn't singing in German anytime soon. Not that I wouldn't love to see that, petition for his voice actor Hagiwara Masato to sing Wagner, but you could argue that there is an aesthetic experience to playing mahjong, especially at Akagi's level. Clearly, Akagi is indifferent to life and death, and is living in a way that is conducive to Schopenhauerian ideals, even living life as a relatively broke guy despite his gambling earnings. He doesn't desire money, women, or fame. He just wants to live in a way that's true to himself. Again, he's fine with returning to the eternal stream in a physical sense, but as the genius he isn't ready to give up being himself. He isn't prepared to face losing who he is. When he was younger, he didn't have these feelings, but now, as an older gentleman, Fukumoto insinuates that this illusion of individuality, leading to the desire to be himself, is what is causing Akagi to start making mistakes at the mahjong table. He needs to be himself. His biggest fear is losing himself. But after the conclusion of the East-West battle, that's exactly what happens. Akagi develops early onset Alzheimer's disease. Several years after the conclusion of the East-West battle, Hiroyuki receives word of a funeral, Akagi's funeral. In disbelief that Akagi would have passed away, he decides to attend the funeral. After he pays his respects and heads to leave the venue, he's approached by a funeral attendant asking him to be one of the witnesses to the funeral. This is something normally reserved for family or very close friends, and though Akagi was a mentor, Hiroyuki wonders why he was chosen. When he enters the room where the rest of the witnesses are, the reason becomes clear. Kanamitsu, Ken, Ginji, Soga, Harada, and Ten are all sitting around a table, looking downtrodden, but not like they're mourning. Kanamitsu reveals that he's been the one who has been handling Akagi's affairs and set up the funeral when Akagi had asked him, so he knows what's going on, but there's still one person who has yet to arrive. The sliding door opens, and a man steps out of the chill night air and into the room. Akagi Shigeru. The funeral was a ruse, and Akagi reveals that he gathered them all here for one final gamble. A game of life and death, where the life on the line is Akagi's. Akagi reveals that he has early onset Alzheimer's disease, and he plans to go out on his own terms while he's still himself. He plans to go out in the same way that death row inmates in America do. A barbiturate paralyzes his nervous system, and another drug enters his veins and induces cardiac arrest. All he has to do is flip a switch. The game is to convince Akagi not to flip that switch by at the end of the night. Each member of the East-West battle in attendance will have his own turn to enter Akagi's room and have a conversation with him to convince him to keep on living. In the same way that the Mahjong gameplay gets enhanced by the philosophies of each character sitting at the Mahjong table, each member of the battle has their own philosophies on life that clash with Akagi's as they argue why he should stay alive. The characters in 10 want Akagi to stay alive, and of course, we as fans of Akagi want him to keep on living so he can keep being himself for as long as he can before he loses himself to the Alzheimer's. Kanamitsu is the first to enter Akagi's room. Akagi thanks him for taking responsibility for the funeral and tells Kanamitsu that the East-West battle was his last serious match, so he wanted the people from that match to be here conversing with him before he died, rather than having people mourn him after his death. Kanamitsu says that he won't try to stop Akagi, and Akagi calls him a kind-hearted person, but Kanamitsu admits that he won't try to stop anyone else from trying their hardest. Akagi comes back and says that if he hesitates and decides to turn back, when he dies, he'll already be dead in spirit. Kanamitsu leaves, and Akagi remains unconvinced. Ken and another guy at the battle that I forgot about because he's a minor character and he's on the East team, Washio, both go in and try to convince Akagi to keep living. As minor characters, we don't get to see their interactions with Akagi, but both of them leave, and Akagi remains unconvinced. In chapter 144, titled Consciousness, the fourth one to enter is Ginji, the older gentleman known as a Mahjong hustler earlier in life. He's a strong gentleman, proud of his accomplishments. Ginji and Akagi talk about the nature of death and how Akagi is going about it. They even bring up the Schopenhauer-inspired concept that Akagi's choice isn't out of fear of wanting a new, better life, but comes from a different place entirely. He's fully aware of what he's doing. This isn't escapism. It's during Akagi's conversation that Ginji, despite being the strong guy that he is, asks Akagi if he's scared. Wouldn't someone facing death be scared? Akagi replies with true Schopenhauer-esque wisdom. Whether my consciousness remains or disappears, either way, it's okay. Either way it goes, there's nothing to worry about. Ginji asks Akagi if something like a soul or a consciousness persists after death, and Akagi replies that he couldn't possibly know that, but he replies, if you consider that we were lifeless things at the beginning. All of us, long ago, were grains of sand, dust in the ocean, stones, and other dead things. From there, primitive life was born and evolved further and further, becoming human. If that's so, the start of all living things has its basis among lifeless things. That basis, to put it roughly, a certain will. There must be something like a kind of will among lifeless things, a feeling of wanting to be alive. After that feeling comes, lifeless things change into living things. If they don't take that direction, they stay dead for eternity. Or, you can think about it this way. Simple sand and stone and water, things we don't normally think of as alive, you can say they're eternal. In the midst of that long cycle, change continues, and that means it's beyond the measure of our lives. That's what life is. And to die is to return to that life. What is already here now will continue to exist, even if the form of it changes. Genji breaks down sobbing. He says that it came back. Nothing happened for 2 years, but this time it's spread. Genji has cancer. It's spread to his lymph nodes, and surgery won't help him anymore. He has a slim chance with chemotherapy, but he's terrified of dying. And Akagi replies that there's nothing to be afraid of. Akagi will die first. The way Akagi sees it, a good person will be given a good death. A little past 11 p.m., 40 minutes after leaving the other witnesses, Genji leaves, and Akagi remains unconvinced. Soga is the next person to enter Akagi's room, and he decides to play a game with Akagi, where if Soga wins, Akagi has to live, and if Soga loses, Soga dies, and so does Akagi. Soga challenges Akagi to a game of Mahjong, but Akagi confesses that he's forgotten how to play Mahjong. Soga is destroyed by this news, but continues on, knowing that Akagi has to live. He challenges Akagi to a different game, a matching game, using tiles numbered 1 through 9. Each round, the players lay a number 1 through 9 face down on the table, and the higher number takes the round. If you tie, you keep going until there's a difference between the two. Akagi agrees on the condition that if the game is a tie, all bets are off with no rematches. Soga has to leave him alone, and also gets to keep on living. It's the only scenario where Akagi gets what he wants, Akagi dying and Soga living. The first round, Soga plays a 4, and so does Akagi. The second round, they both play 2s, and of course this goes on for all 9 tiles, and the game is a tie. Akagi ties the game, and all bets are off. Soga confronts Akagi, asking why he wants to die, and Akagi replies that he won't be able to play games, let alone Mahjong, as the disease progresses. To Akagi, life is all about the game. Soga replies that there are women, wine, friends, and family that are worth living for, but Akagi replies, those things are only breaks from the game, a rest. Soga thinks that this is biased thinking, but Akagi replies that this is biased thinking. The game is the only thing that he's been proud to have lived for. Soga replies that a man who lived beyond the heavens should die beyond the heavens. He leaves the room, and Akagi remains unconvinced. Chapter 150, titled Abductions, sees Harada calling his goons into the room with him and Akagi to try and abduct Akagi to stop him from dying. Akagi says that all he has to do is flip the switch, so realistically he'll be dead before Harada's goons can abduct him. The goons leave the room, and Harada and Akagi finally have a conversation. Harada asks if any part of Akagi still wants to live, and he says maybe about 3%. Because the feeling of wanting to live can never be completely extinguished. No matter how hard you try, it'll be black and white. Harada might be pitying Akagi and his situation, but Akagi states that he actually thinks that Harada is worse off than he is, because he's barely living. He has too much success piled up on top of him, and he's in charge of too many people, and he's the leader of a dangerous gang. He can't be too happy, or too sad, or show fear, or not wear a suit, or take his shoes off on the lawn, because he has to keep up the image of someone that can be trusted as a leader. His success and his possessions tie him down. It's like he's in a coffin of his own success, living like a corpse, unable to move. He's being strangled by his own obligations. After realizing Akagi is right, Harada leaves the room, and Akagi remains unconvinced. Hiroyuki enters the room with Akagi and sits down next to him. He takes time to seriously consider what he's going to say to Akagi, what can convince him, and Akagi bursts out laughing. It's so like Hiroyuki to not have said anything. Akagi criticizes Hiroyuki for always trying to find the perfect solution to everything. He tells him that even if it's not perfect, starting to move opens up a path on its own. Hiroyuki is frozen and can't decide what to do. Soga's tiles are still beside Akagi, who mixes them up and tells Hiroyuki that if he can find both of the ones in the pile and turn them both over one after the other on the first try, he'll keep on living out of respect for that miracle. But if Hiroyuki loses, Akagi gets to cut off one of his arms. Immediately, Hiroyuki starts calculating the probability, which works out to about 1 in 153, and again, Akagi laughs at Hiroyuki. Akagi accuses Hiroyuki of being half dead for the past 9 years since the East-West battle. He's simply not moving and has lived a life that is smoldering. He needs to find the spark of life again. Hiroyuki is afraid of losing, taking risk, and getting hurt, but according to Akagi, being hurt is the basis for a miracle or accomplishments. And you can see this through various geniuses throughout history that never lived an easy life but achieved great things. Hiroyuki lives a proper life, but Akagi argues that the values of normality and being proper in line with society's definitions is what is conflicting with Hiroyuki's heart and soul. The definition of what is a proper life changes from era to era, and there's been too many differing definitions of a proper life for it to be the real answer. Akagi gives Hiroyuki one last lecture, one that sticks with fans for a long time. You're so caught up in worrying about success and failure that you stopped. You lost your fire. That's the trouble. That's the problem. It's fine to be third rate. If you're third rate with that spark, that's excellent. It doesn't make any difference, so don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of failure. Hiroyuki admits defeat and leaves the room, and Akagi remains unconvinced. Hiroyuki is sulking on the walkway back to the rest of the witnesses when Harada approaches him. This man, who would never give Hiroyuki the light of day under any other circumstances, opens up to him, saying that they're both restricted, one choked by his success and one by his fear of failure. They decide the only thing that they could do was to leave it up to the last man standing, Ten. Ten enters Akagi's room and makes the argument that a cure for Alzheimer's could be found tomorrow and that he shouldn't give up just because things look bad. Shouldn't that be the ultimate gamble that Akagi bets on? Akagi remarks that his brain cells have already died and they can't come back. The best case scenario is that he remains exactly as he is now, and Akagi Shigeru that can't play mahjong. He tells Ten that he's going to die because the self is more important than life. Akagi argues that the body he occupies is his vehicle, but his mind and his self are the driver, which is something Schopenhauer argued in his writings as well. Akagi says that he's never going to be anyone other than himself, even if that person is one who would make a deadly mistake. Akagi then recites an old Japanese saying, quote, "In the end, only death can cure a fool." Akagi shares one last drink with Ten, and remaining unconvinced, Akagi flips the switch. Ten brushes over and pinches the IV tube to stop the flow of drugs just in time for everyone else to hear the commotion and come running in to plead to Akagi, but his grip isn't strong enough, and the drugs flow into Akagi all the same. As the lights fade, Akagi thinks to himself, "Release it, this life. When I realized what I had in my hands was this illusion known as Akagi Shigeru, this consciousness, release it. I'm done with it." Right then, Akagi Shigeru looked like he was faintly smiling, as if he was thanking everyone who had gathered, thanking his own life now that it had ended. That was what it looked like. It was that kind of quiet, genuine smile. September 26th, 1999, Akagi Shigeru passed away, surrounded by his closest friends, at the age of 53. Every year on September 26th, Nobuyuki Fukumoto and a bunch of his fans meet up in his friend's bar to pay tribute to the life of Akagi Shigeru. The Buddhist tradition of this death anniversary is practiced all across not just Japan, but everywhere Buddhism is practiced. And the reason why Akagi's story speaks to me so deeply is that today, the day that this video was uploaded, is November 14th, 2025. 10 years from the day that I nearly did what Akagi did. I had suffered a concussion in my sophomore year of high school, and then suffered another concussion before the first one healed, which is called second impact syndrome. 50% of people die from that, and 100% of people face deficits including impaired cognitive abilities, physical symptoms like lifelong persistent headaches, and emotional and behavioral changes like depression. I did not want to live the rest of my life with those deficits. Today would have been the 10th anniversary of my death, had it not been for my best friend showing up at the exact moment before it happened and ringing my doorbell. I totally forgot that I had invited him over because I knew my parents would be out of the house. And he wanted to come over and work on a piece of music that we were performing with the Cleveland Orchestra because we were both bass range singers, and I had been to a rehearsal that he had missed. And when we were done with that, he wanted to play fighting games. We sang and we played Blaze Blue in my parents' basement, and he knows all of this, and I know you watch my videos, you handsome son of a bitch. I still love you, man. Since then, I've kept both singing and fighting games in my life, and you know what? It turns out I'm not a bass. I'm a Helden tenor, and I get to sing Wagner arias to my heart's content. And that's something I would have never known. And 3 years after that, in 2018, I met the woman who is now my fiance, and I met her through singing. November 19th will be our 7th anniversary. And if I'm honest with you, the fear of those cognitive deficits never went away. Luckily, I was only 16 at the time, so I had plenty of growing to do and neuroplasticity to spare. When I got tested for ADHD in college, my IQ did drop. I'm now at 165, which I realize is a flex, but when you were above that earlier in life, you feel the difference. And I developed ADHD-like symptoms that I now medicate, and I live a fulfilling and happy life. I'm 28 now, and thinking back to 10 years ago, I mean, really, who's the same person that they were at 18 when they're 28 anyway? I'm getting married, I own a home, I have a great job, and I have a lot of good friends to play mahjong with, and sometimes we all get to pretend like we could still have a shot at competing in a fighting game tournament. Akagi's Alzheimer's and subsequent decision to die just totally blew me away, because I immediately recognized myself in that story like no other story I have before. I mean, I really, truly lived through that, but that is the difference. I lived through that. And if I could, I think anyone can. 10 is an amazing manga with way more content than I covered in this video, and you should really go read it for yourself. It's funny how death can teach you so much about life, and I am so happy for you that you have a story that is fiction where you can learn the same lessons that I did 10 years ago. But we can't end on a sad note with all this talk about death and second impact syndrome, so how about a joke for the road, huh? What's Tenhoutei's favorite fighting game? Street Fighter 3 Second Impact. Ha! Subscribe.